In this bulletin, now you can make your own printer cartridges from scratch. The real reasons why a general exclusion order was made 6 weeks ago in the USA revealed, and one remanufacturer is ready to do battle with Lexmark.
From across the planet, Recycling Times keeps you in touch with the latest computer printing news.
Hello, I'm David Gibbons and here is the news. You have heard of a shoe and even a gun being made on a 3D printer. Now, a printer cartridge has been designed and made using a 3D printer in England. Ink Factory came up with the black and colour prototypes which work in a Kodak printer. The cartridge only costs about £1.60 or $2.58 US, 90% cheaper than the original cartridges. Ink Factory believes 3D printers will become more and more popular in homes and businesses in the next 10 years, and consumers will want to take advantage of the cost savings. At this stage, the project is just an experiment, but Ink Factory has proved 3D printing provides new opportunities.
Well, for us, the story all along was, what if a home user with a 3D printer could print their own cartridges? So it was never about us producing them commercially, as it were, but what if a kit could be produced? But there's lots of issues, shall we say, around that. They've got to have a 3D printer to start with, and they're not cheap at the moment. And also the intellectual property of, say, companies like Kyocera and Epson, etc. You'd be violating their intellectual property. And also the microchips that come on the inkjets. Essentially, we can't produce them on a 3D printer at the moment. So really, this was one of those hypothetical what-ifs as opposed to a commercial opportunity.
And 3D printing will be on show at the Printing Consumables Expo in Zhuhai in October. Many visitors will want to see what tie-ins 3D printing may have with the laser and inkjet printing when it comes to supplying consumables. The iPrint show will be held at the same time as Remax Asia in Zhuhai, China in October. Last year, many US remanufacturers received legal letters from Lexmark because they were reusing empty Lexmark cartridges collected from outside of the United States. Lexmark claims they still have patent rights on cartridges sold outside of the USA, as opposed to cartridges sold within the United States, where OEMs do lose all patent rights after the sale has been made. One remanufacturer has now filed a motion to dismiss Lexmark's claims against them. Impression Products believe Lexmark's patent rights have been extinguished wherever the cartridge is sold and is relying on a copyright precedent to help them. And I have Impression Products attorney Ed O'Connor online. Tell me, Ed, why do you think Impression Products can win this battle with Lexmark?
Well, the reason I do is that if you read the Supreme Court copyright case, which was the Kurtzang versus John Wiley publications, the rationale given by the Supreme Court would have to apply to first sales of patented products as well as copyrighted products. That decision was based in large part on statements by Lord Coke back in the 1600s, where he was talking about the sale of a horse. And Lord Coke said that when you sell anything, all the rights go with it. So the Supreme Court said, well, that obviously would include intellectual property rights, and in particular, that case involved copyright rights. But copyright rights and patent rights are both intellectual property rights. And since Lord Coke said all rights, well, logically, that would have to include patent rights. So if you use the basis for the court's decision, I believe that the Supreme Court, in effect, overturns Jazz Photo, which is the case on which Lexmark is relying.
Thanks, Ed O'Connor from the Eclipse Group. And please don't go too far, Ed. I'd like you to comment on this next story as well. 30 days after granting an order preventing printer cartridges entering the US, which infringe one or more of Canon's patents, the International Trade Commission, or ITC, has issued a public version of its opinion. The Commission did not issue a limited exclusion order because there was evidence companies who infringed Canon's patents often did their business under multiple names and profiles. Further, the Commission found foreign companies often kept large stocks of infringing products as part of a venture with domestic companies. And in some cases, the Commission also found it was often quite difficult to identify the foreign source of infringing products. In the opinion of the ITC, a general exclusion order was the only way to protect the intellectual property of Canon in the United States. The matter of issuing exclusion orders is not necessarily clear-cut, however. Ed, could you please comment further?
The ITC, in issuing its order, was really doing damage to competition. And this is the first time a president has done this, in certainly my memory, in a long time. But the ITC tends to simply look at its cases as patent cases, if it's a patent issue, not a trademark issue. So they look at the patent and they act as though it's a court. And so they look at the claims, they look at the product, and they say, okay, this product infringes these claims, and therefore we're going to issue an exclusion order. And the president having overturned an ITC order, I think may have sent a message to the ITC that it needs to do more evaluation other than simply patent infringement. They need to do an analysis, because that's their job, as to what impact this has in terms of domestic trade. Because that's the purpose. The purpose is not to act as a substitute for federal courts. Its purpose is to protect domestic trade and to do it in a way that makes sense. So I think you may see some changes in the attitude on the ITC in the future.
Thanks again, Ed O'Connor from the Eclipse Group. And I'll be back with more breaking news in just 15 seconds. And in brief, HP has expanded its efforts in the Philippines by opening a new delivery centre. According to CBN News, the new centre will start commercial operations later this year. There has been an increase in the number of laser printers sold in Western Europe. According to IDC, 11.6% more laser printers were sold last quarter in Western Europe compared with the same time last year. However, the number of inkjet printers shipped has remained flat. Kyocera claims its profit has more than tripled, helped by the higher sales of colour printers and the weaker yen. Their net income rose from 6 billion to 22 billion yen, or $230 million in the 3 months ended June 30. Kodak's boss, who oversaw the toughest time in the company's history, will step down from the position sometime in the next 12 months. Antonio Perez will serve as CEO of Eastman Kodak once it exits from bankruptcy, but only until a successor is named. Rochester's tallest building, the 30-storey Xerox Tower, has been sold for $40 million after being on the market for the last 4 years. Under the deal, Xerox will remain a tenant and its 1,400 employees will continue to work there for at least 8 years. Oki's new 47-page-per-minute monochrome multifunction printer has been recognised by the Independent Buyers Laboratory. Following tests, BLI said the printer possessed a lower than average energy consumption rate, above average toner yield, and the ability to fax and scan without requiring full machine warm-up. And I will talk to MSC's Mark Dawson in Britain in just 15 seconds. Manufacturing giant MSC has gone on record saying value is more important than price. MSC's Mark Dawson joins me from Britain. Hello Mark. Do you think remanufacturers are focusing more on competing with the cheap clone imports rather than the more expensive OEM products?
Yes, David, I think that is happening in the marketplace. I think sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's unconscious. But yes, it's definitely happening.
Thanks, Mark. And you can read more of what Mark has to say in this month's Recycling Times magazine with the ISC's Alan Westerfield on the front cover. Those were the biggest stories in printer consumable news this week. See you again next week. I'm David Gibbons.